This is May the 16th, 1979, and we're at the Oklahoma Living Legends office, and Neil Tuohy is making an interview with Mr. Bob Maney. That's Robert. What is your full name, Mr. Maney? Robert Michael Maney, who is the son of J.W. Maney. Both of his father was one of the pioneer builders, railroad men and builders in Oklahoma. Mr. Maney, Mr. Bob Maney, has seen a great deal of Oklahoma history and has been a part of a great deal of Oklahoma history. And we'll be talking both about his experiences, about his remembrances of his father's experiences, and early Oklahoma City, the things you remember, as well as some of the people that you have been involved with and been friends with over the years.
Bob, what year did your father come to Oklahoma City, or he first came from Pittsburgh? Is that right?
He was born January 3rd, 1862.
Whereabouts?
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And later moved.
He was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, you said, and then he migrated to Iowa.
Well, his family took him with him to Iowa. The family, his mother and father and the other children that were there, they moved to Iowa.
And that's where he went to school.
Well, he went to the lower grades there and around Osceola, Iowa. I'm not sure just where, but...
What town was that?
Osceola.
Osceola.
Yeah, Osceola, I think it is. I'm not sure about that spelling. Then he went to Red Rock College at Red Rock, Iowa. And he graduated a civil engineer's diploma there at the age of 19.
Civil engineer at age 19.
That's right. And then he went to work employee of the Union Pacific Railroad.
The Union P, the UP Trail, I always think of.
That's right. And later on, things got hard. And
you said he went to work for the UP Railroad. I wonder whereabouts.
Well, they were civil engineers who worked away from town. They worked out of Omaha, Nebraska.
Oh, he actually worked on the UP Trail. I mean, the Union Pacific?
No, they would survey. They'd send these surveying crews out, maybe 8 or 10 of them. And they survey different lines going to the west. And then they would choose which line that they wanted. And the railroad was built off of those surveys.
In other words, they chose whichever was feasible.
Well, I think the Union Pacific was built to the west prior to the time that he was surveying out there for them.
That's true.
But at that time, railroad building was very lucrative. Railroads were being built all over the whole United States.
Can you remember any of the actual roads that he worked on?
Oh, we used to work. His first contract was on the Burlington Railroad, going out of Omaha towards Kansas City, I think. That was his first contract. But take in mind, back in those days, they'd have a main promoter for a line, generally in Eastern Finance, with the companies back east, and they'd hire a main contractor, and the main contractor would hire subcontractors. That's the way the railroads were built, and that was normal procedure.
But the money actually came from the east.
Oh, yes, it came from the east. His railroad building wasn't too steady. At that time, he freighted by a mule team to the Black Hills of South Dakota in these early days.
What do you mean he freighted?
Old freight teams up there. All freight.
Is it for himself or as an employee?
That I never heard. He never did tell me one way or the other. I assumed that he was doing it for himself at the time. But maybe he might have been working for somebody too, as far as that goes.
But he was in the freight team. He freighted by mule.
In the early days, yeah. And then he took a job working as a section hand, and on the Union Pacific, west of Omaha. And he was working out there one day, and in those days, the president of the roads are very friendly, and everything's even to the water boy. And he hit him up for an engineering job on the railroad. He said, I can't promise anything, but if you ride back on the train that I'm going back on right now and appear down there at Omaha, you get yourself a job as an engineer, because they have picked a crew. They pick crews every day, and a lot of times one or two don't show up. And that's what he did. He went down there, and sure enough, that's the way it happened. He became an engineer on the Union Pacific Railroad. Then...
I was a civil engineer.
Yeah. And then he got to seeing how the different parties were making more money than he was making, contracting. So he got him a few teams and went to work contracting. And from that time on, he stayed with railroad contracting until the last job I can remember that he did on the railroad was, let's see, it was about, I'm not certain about this, but the last job of any length was on the Santa Fe Railroad from Kearney, Kansas to Pawhuska, to the junction down there. He built that complete, railroad stations and all.
He worked on one in eastern Oklahoma also.
Oh, he built the Midland Valley Railroad out of Arkansas, crossed Oklahoma into Kansas, through Tulsa. And
was he a subcontractor? He had
he contracted that off of the people that were promoting it. I don't know who were the promoters of it, but anyway. But even and then he built the Fort Smith and Western coming out, came down through Chandler and up around on different sections of that. You understand? You don't get a full length contract for anything that some of their contracts might only be 25 miles, but some of them could be 200 miles or better. That's the way you take it. And if they going any farther, well, you could take another contract for likewise. But the biggest contract he ever had was on the Western Pacific Railroad. It was built from Salt Lake City west to California line at that time.
What line was that?
Western Pacific. It's in operation today.
And where the line that he worked on, where did it run from and to?
Well, from Salt Lake City and then went through Sacramento and on up.
Through Nevada.
Yeah, through Nevada and then to California and then to San Francisco, I guess. I don't know. They were Seattle, Washington. They go through the whole West out there, the Western Pacific does.
Actually, he was up at Sacramento, too.
Well, he never did do much contracting. He might have... I've got some stock certificate on the interurban line that was built around Sacramento.
Really?
That is of no good. But
well, he also worked on the...
now that contract was 250 miles that he did through Nevada. And his headquarters, he established his headquarters at Winnemucca.
Winnemucca, he went right through the desert.
And he moved his family out there.
Was Mr. Maney married then?
He was married then, yes. He moved his family out to Winnemucca. Well, Mr. Maney was married to Alphonsina Gear in El Reno, Oklahoma in 1896.
1896, the date of his marriage. When did you tell when he was born?
Yeah, I told you when he was born, yeah.
18 what?
62.
Okay, he married there was a Father Gerrer that was a famous artist. Was that in relation to you all?
Yeah, my mother's brother.
He had paintings at the museum there in Shawnee, Oklahoma. Is that right?
That's right. He joined the priesthood. He went to Sacred Heart before Shawnee St. Gregory's College was formed. He went to Sacred Heart, Oklahoma. That's where these Benedictine fathers were located at that time. And he never had any art lessons or anything, and he just went down there, and the first thing you knew, he started painting. And it just came natural to him. He painted, and then later on, he was ordained a priest in London, England, in 1900. And went on to Rome. And Pope Pius X set for a life-size painting for him. He painted him. It's hanging in the Vatican over there today.
It's hanging in the Vatican today.
Now, he made a copy for himself, and that's hanging down here at St. Gregory's College, down at Shawnee right now.
And Father Gerrer, how do you spell his last name?
Gerrer. Father Gregory Gerrer is his real name. And, well, it's Robert, really. Robert Gerrer.
He was an authority on art and paintings, wasn't he?
Yeah, the biggest find he ever found in art, I think. It was written up in Oklahoma. They have it right up on it. I think I have the clipping at home. He'd go into junk shops and hawk shops to buy old frames. Mm-hmm. And these paintings, he said a lot of times these families don't care for the paintings that the old folks had at home, so they'd just sell them for little or nothing to everybody. And then they get in the hawk shops, and they'd sell them to some restaurant, some cowboy artist come along and paint over the face of them, and paint a different scene on there for a meal. And then the restaurant would go out of business, so it'd come back to the hawk shop. And next thing you knew, it was sold again, and they'd do painting over the top of that. But he found one painting that he bought for a frame that he liked very well, but he just, through curiosity, he dug into the painting. And I don't know how they do this, but he got back to the original painting through all these other paint that was put on it. But anyway, it's valued by the experts, not him, by experts of being worth $1 million. And it's hanging up in Notre Dame College right now.
It's who's painting? Who does the painting belong to?
Well, anything that belonged to Father Gerrer automatically becomes the property of the Benedictine fathers. He has no estate.
He has no estate.
No.
Well, is Notre Dame run by the Benedictine fathers?
Well, no, it's run by. Let's see.
Well, in other words, it's just loaned to Notre Dame.
I don't know what it is. But he would go out on, the Benedictine fathers are missionary fathers, and he'd go out on relief assignments in summertime to different parishes and take the place of the pastor while they were going. He'd be assigned to those things. They'd sign those. That's where he'd go to the various parts of the country, and then he would find all these other paintings and things like that.
Okay, then
He's well known in New York City also.
Father Gerrer is?
Yeah, and also London and, of course, Rome.
I've seen his paintings, and they're very, very beautiful paintings. I know they're valuable today.
He was born in France, in Luxembourg.
Oh, he was?
Alsace-Lorraine. Mother's parents were all born there and came to this country after Bismarck invasion of Alsace-Lorraine.
What invasion?
Bismarck.
Oh, Bismarck.
Yeah.
And she was your mother born in France?
Yeah. She was born there too. And my father's parents were born in south part of Ireland.
Your father was, folks were born in Ireland?
Yeah. South part of it. He also came to America when he was 19 years old.
your grandfather?
Grandfather. I have his citizenship papers, and he was in the Civil War, and I have his Army discharge papers.
Well, you have his Army discharge from the Civil War. That'd be your grandfather.
Yeah, and I also have his citizenship papers. Yeah, we got those.
Bob, what year was it that the Maney family moved to Oklahoma City, or moved to El Reno? That's where they moved first.
Well, my dad came down there by himself, and he was a bachelor, and they had a drawing over there, and he drew 2 lots, 5 miles south of El Reno. And he lived out there and improved those and added additional land to that during his stay there. And up until the time he got married in 1896, he sold the lots that he had drawn and bought a farm out at 2.5 miles west of Calumet, Oklahoma. And as a boy, I spent my summers working out there on that farm. And let's see, he moved from. Mother had, through this marriage, there were 7 children. One was born dead, first one. That was Maney, M-A-N-Y, not M-A-N-Y, Maney, Louisiana. He's on a contract down there. And then came Marie, then Beatrice, myself, and then Lucille, then Agnes, and then Florence, and then James.
That was in the Canadian county. Was he county surveyor there?
He was appointed county surveyor when the county was first formed. And later on, during his absence, working in the West on railroads, why somebody put his name on, he's elected again. So I have those 2 certificates in my collection at home. And
was there? I remember you all had a big vault, burial vault over there.
Well,
was that for the mate? That wasn't for your family, was it?
Well, that was for that he had built that. He had a burial when his dad died. He'd moved his mother and father to El Reno then, and they lived just 3 houses north of the Catholic Church there. And when he died, that is the grandfather, he buried him there in the El Reno Cemetery, and it was a semi-grave. It was half above ground, half below. And he noticed that quite a bit of water seepage had gotten in there, so he decided to build a vault, which he did do. He built a vault over there, which is now stands. And in that vault now, my mother and father, her parents, his parents, and one of his sisters, and Mr. Fogarty, and one child's buried there right now. They also bought lots.
He formed the first Knights of Columbus chapter there too.
Well, he was first one in Oklahoma. He was elected Grand Knight of the Knights of Columbus when it was first formed. And later on, other units were organized later on, and I don't know whether, I think Chickasha was next, and then Oklahoma City, something like that.
Did you all have a flour mill there in El Reno?
Well, that's kind of a story in the flour mill. He had just finished his contracting out in the West, and he had been very successful at that. And he's on a train coming from Wichita, Kansas, down to El Reno, and he sat in the same seat as a fellow named Lassen, and that's that fellow that was later on was the Lassen Hotel. And at that time, Lassen was building flour mills. So Dad had built a Rock Island west out of Reno to Weatherford, which was the end of the line at that time. Lassen built a flour mill out there. But before they got to before they got to El Reno on the train, Lassen had sold Dad the flour mill. Well, that's when they got into the flour business. Well, he put his brother out there, John Maney. And they operated there for quite a long while. And he was quite saying to have employees on stock in the companies that he would form. And he gave some stock to some, and he did out there at Weatherford when they first started. And that was very lucrative trading at that time. They kind of got overboard, and they paid 100% dividend. They paid out their stock. In other words, they got their stock for nothing. But
well, then he wound up owning 4 or 5. Is that right?
They had the Weatherford Milling Company. They had the Foss Milling Company. They had the Canadian Milling Elevator Company, El Reno. They had the Thomas Milling Company at Thomas, Oklahoma. And they bought into the Ian Milling Company from Creason and McChristie that owned it at that time. They bought that in 1916. And that is results after the Weatherford Mill burned down and the Thomas Mill burned down. And the assets of the company went into that Ian Mill up there.
How about Omaha?
Well, the Chamber of Commerce in Omaha had heard about his operation in flour milling down here, and they hadn't, at that time, there wasn't any flour mill in Omaha. So they got down there and saw him and said they'd like to have a flour mill up. He said, well, you come up and take a look around with them. They looked up there, and then he built a flour mill up there. In the first year he operated there, the thing burned down, but he rebuilt it. And it turned out to be a nice enterprise. It was successful.
When did you all move to Oklahoma City?
Well, the house now is located 11th and Chartel right now. It was built at 917 North Robinson.
That would be north of that St. Luke's Church.
Well, that'd be north of the Central High School. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, anyway, no, that wasn't. That between 8th and 9th, not between 9th and 10th. It was between 8th and 9th. 917, I think, is the name of it. Yeah. All right. They was built it in 1904, and he moved into it in January the 5th of 1905. For Bell Reno. That's when the family actually moved to Oklahoma City. And they stayed at that location until 1909. And the party that owned the house on the corner north of him, on 9th and Robinson, was Dr. Kirkpatrick, the dentist. He's the father of these Kirkpatrick family that's here in town now. And as kids, we were growing up together. But they decided that getting too commercial around there, churches and schools and things, and they were going to move out in the country.
Was that John Kirkpatrick?
Well, that was his father. Yeah, I don't remember what his father's real name was, but...
He was a dentist.
Yeah, he was a dentist here in Oklahoma City. And they moved out, and Dad moved his house to 11th and Chartel, and...
How'd he happen to move it up to 11th and Chartel?
Well, he bought the lots up there.
Oh, why did he want to leave so quickly after he located on 9th Street?
Well, I just told you, he thought it was getting too commercial down there. The high school and churches and things building all around it wouldn't be a proper place to have a house, or have a residence.
And a family.
And a family. And they moved up there. Now, that was all alfalfa field when we moved in there.
Well, how did they move it?
Well, they moved by block and tackle and teams. And had a rolling pin. Well, it's been so long ago, I'd say the rolling pin might be 8 inches in diameter, maybe 10. And they had plank boards laid down on what paving what they went over then, and on the bottom of the house. And they just blew it up that far and then quit, and they'd have to go up and drive some steel stakes down in the ground to where they could hook their pulleys onto that to move it up again, change their planks.
With mules.
What mules or horses? I don't remember which it was.
And did they come up to
They
10th Street?
They came up 10th Street and they went to up what is now Classen Drive, and that was dirt road then. And then when they got to 11th and what should be Dewey, they didn't stay on the road then. They just took off across the alfalfa field and moved it up to its present location. Mm-hmm. And they set the house in it. And later on, the old clay dirt up there and all, they just put about 2 or 2.5 feet of dirt, hauled in, built it up, well, so they could have something to grow up there.
In front of the house there, I noticed they have a sign that says Maney Park.
Well, that's it. That's it. That was a Classen Marquette addition to Oklahoma City. Uh-huh. And he moved up there in 1909. And he bought, a good-sized lot. And we owned that property until last year. Mm-hmm. And which we sold it to, which is the developer now that's to the
a law firm, isn't it?
Well, Bleakley and somebody else. But 4 or 5 of them in on it. And now they have sold off the other 2 houses. I had bought their house on the east side of the house.
You own the property east and north, too.
Yeah, that's right. And those houses there. And when we moved up there, there's a fellow named Brown that lived up on the north side of us. And later on, a house was built to the south, and I don't remember the name of the people that built that house, but there was a bachelor and what do you call them, old maids? Yeah, old maids. They stayed single all the time. They later sold their house out to Smeltzer. Smeltzers lived there for years. Then we bought it off of Smeltzer.
That was that Smeltzer that was the basketball coach.
Well, they had these boys and girls, and they owned restaurants here in town and so forth, yeah. And that's where they were right up there. But that isn't the whole neighborhood up there. There, the guy said, Dr. Messenbaugh raised his family up to the cross street on 11th Street. Dr. Kuhn was raised up there, right, second location, south of 11th Street in Charlottetown. And Dr. Bynum was up in the middle of the block. And of course, your family was on the corner there. And there was the Hiley family was across the street. You bought the house that Hiley owned there. And on the corner was Dr. Young. It's a nice neighborhood, yeah.
And Hiley, is that related to Mount Hiley?
That's right. That's Mount Hiley. That's where the old grandfather lived to start with. And after he sold the house to your folks, he bought a house next door up close to 12th Street, in the same block. Yeah. And of course he had 2 sisters, Mame and Grace Hiley, and there was Mont. Well, Mont, he later built a house up here on 38th and Classen West, a 2-story yellow brick house, right to the west of Classen, about a half a block.
Well, that big Hiley house out northeast, they call it.
He built that, too. He built that out. They moved out there later on. Mm-hmm. But he lived out there quite a long while out there off Classen.
Quite a little while. This Penn Woods, visiting a little bit with Mr. Maney, and I wonder if, what year do you first remember in Oklahoma City?
Well, I can remember probably about 1906, 7.
So we're talking about right about the time of statehood.
See, I was only born in 1903, but I got a good memory. I can go way back.
Yeah.
I remember everything that's happened all the way through, it seemed like.
Well, you remember the building of practically every building downtown.
Well, practically, Dad built his office building down there. He and a fellow named Rutledge built a building together. And Dad owned the west half, and he owned the other fellow owned the east half. And they operated that way. And then later on, 2 or 3 years, Dad bought him out. And he owned that property until Urban Renewal took it from us.
Where was that building?
Now, the Empire Building, 12426 West Main Street.
Oh.
Right next to the Criterion Theater.
No, there was one building in between
Oh,
us.
there was.
Yeah, and there was another two-story building right in between.
It was to the west of the Criterion, is
Yeah,
that correct?
yeah. Now, in this Empire Building down there in the early days, that's where your first YWCA was formed. And 2 or 3 women would come up there, and they'd bring their stuff down. They'd cook it on an oil stove in the room.
Where was the Y? What floor was it on?
It was on the 4th floor.
And it was a 4-story building?
4-story building.
5-story?
No, 4-story.
4-story.
4-story building.
Did they have the whole 4th floor?
No, they just had one room down there to start with.
Uh-huh.
And after that, I don't know where they went, really.
Do you remember the people who were involved with the first Y?
Well, Oklahoma Historical Society has that because they finally put a plat up on the building. And Mrs. Gerrer, I believe, or somebody like that, and some other lady was the organizer here.
Now, that building was built what year?
1902.
1902.
It was known as the Line Store Building in the early days on account of a department store that moved out from Broadway and Grand at that time. Up there, they wanted to pack the whole building. Well, he had some office rooms up there. They had the 2 floors, first and second floors.
Did the Lion Store move from Grand and Broadway to that area?
That's right. And then, but it was known as the Line Store Building at that time. They wanted the building known as that. And then, let's see, I was going to say something else that I don't remember there. On the second floor later on, the Baptist Bookstore was located in there for quite a while. And then in the early days, when it was first built, Knights of Columbus had half of the 4th floor up there also as a lodge operation.
Now, the Lion Store originally was on the northeast corner of Main and Broadway.
In the old Hershquit building, which is
was
Hershquit now.
No.
Huh?
Are you sure? Well, you mean it? Well, when was it there? I meant Main and Robinson. I mean Broadway, but I thought
Main and Broadway, but it's on the northeast corner. The Hershquit owned that corner for years.
Wasn't it Main and Robinson?
No, Main and Broadway on the northeast corner. In my opinion,
About when was that?
right after 19. This thing here is all hearsay.
I realize.
As hearsay that because I don't even remember the Lion Store occupying the building. It's all.
Actually, probably they rented and maybe had a couple of locations before they put up their own building. Now, when we refer to the Lions building and everything, we think of Broadway at Grand Boulevard. I mean, Broadway and Grand is being.
Yes, but before that, I believe it was on. Yes, but before it
You
burned.
talking about where the Fidelity Bank comes?
Yes, where it started.
Yeah, well, over that way.
The old oil and gas building.
No,
Now called the oil and gas.
no, right on the corner. That's what's there. They turned in the Hershquit's apartments.
Oh, that came later, Bob. That's Broadway and Grand, and they had one of the first skyscraper was there. That 12-story Hershquit building.
Yeah.
It was in there. I remember that.
The Lion was.
It was in there,
It
yeah.
must
But
have been in several locations.
it was.
Now, I believe in 1900 when they had the Rough Riders Ball, if I'm correct. And I get this from different people, and I'm trying to, it obviously was in several different places over time. And I understood for a while was right down almost in the middle of Broadway. I've never quite visualized exactly.
Well, that's the location Bob's talking about.
It is.
It was on Broadway, a little bit north of, on the northeast corner there of Broadway and Grand.
Grand, yes.
But that was later. That's a later date.
There's a picture of, during the Rough Riders Ball when Teddy Roosevelt was in the parade. He shows a lion store in the background, and that was 1900. And there, I believe, it was Maine and Robinson, but I understood there was a fire. And I also verified this with city directors, but there was a fire in there.
And burned out there, huh?
Burned out there, and then apparently moved to this Broadway location.
I see.
Most people who remember the location you're talking about, because this other goes back too far.
Yeah, I see.
Goes back.
Can you tell me how back 1,000 people, none of them can tell me, when Oklahoma City's name was Oklahoma City?
You mean when the post office accepted it as Oklahoma City?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
It's known as Oklahoma City. Now, I have a Brand McNally map,
Uh-huh.
and it's a big one.
Yeah.
But like that, business atlas.
Uh-huh. I can tell you.
And it's 1894 or 1890 census. And it showed Oklahoma City. But they don't call it Oklahoma City. It's Oklahoma.
Yeah.
O-T.
Yeah.
Oklahoma O-T. And when was it called Oklahoma City? Because I've seen envelopes addressed to my dad down there in the office down there. In fact, when I was cleaning out, which I should have saved, I was cleaning out and getting ready to get out whenever I knew I was moving. I ran across one of those envelopes.
Frankly, actually, it was a gradual thing. That's hard to answer. For instance, in 1907 or 1910, when they were, and I've got a picture of it out in the outer wall, when they were campaigning for the capital. The thing said vote for Oklahoma City for state capital in July 10th. But the post office did not recognize it. Now that's on the postal marks. Did not recognize it until 1923.
Well,
1923. That's right. The post office did.
Well, these letters here, I can't remember the date that I saw on that thing, on the cancellation of the thing, but it was about the time that map was made, too.
If it was a postal mark, it could have been even the early 1920s instead of Oklahoma. That's hard to believe. But that's right.
In other words, as far as becoming a corporation under the name of Oklahoma City, it wasn't recognized by the postal department, but it became that when it was first formed. Is that what you're saying?
Right. Did you know that Midwest City is probably the 6th or 7th largest city in the state of Oklahoma, and the post office does not recognize it as Midwest City? You look at a postal zone of Oklahoma City. So, and yet it's about the 6th largest city in the state of Oklahoma.
Too bad Oklahoma City doesn't get the benefit in the population.
On the tax.
Well, these zone things have you can mail a letter to Kingfisher at the same zone that.
Yes, but the thing is that cancellations have Oklahoma City. Now a lot of these cancellations just show zip numbers.
Yeah. Well, anyway, see, getting back to what he had done, he built this Choctaw Gulf and Iron Railroad Company that is now the Rock Island to Oklahoma City in the original contracting.
He did do that.
Yeah, he did. They had a contract on built through there.
What year? About when was that? That was way back.
Oh, that goes way back. It was, that goes back prior to in 94, prior to 94. And a fellow named Chadwick was president of the Choctaw Coal. I got a railroad pass in my office right now that was issued to my dad to ride the railroad, the contractor railroad pass. And one from the Santa Fe Railroad, too, is 1900. The same thing, expired in 1900. Well, he done quite a bit of railroad contracting here in Oklahoma. Let's see, the Midland Valley Railroad through the eastern part, and out of Coffeyville, Kansas, down to Wagner on the Missouri Pacific, and then the Santa Fe from Kenny, Kansas, down to the junction south of Pahuska, the Rock Island through Enid, Oklahoma, the first belt, and the Rock Island west of El Reno to Weatherford, Oklahoma. They had an interesting thing happen there. He had located his camp, and the engineers came along and told me, you can't camp here. I said, why? I said, this is a town site, which is Gary, Oklahoma now.
Gary.
So he had to move out of Well,
Did he build a Frisco? Was he involved with it?
yes, he did. He had a contract to Stroud coming over here, just part of it. And then I explained in the early part before you were listening here that you take the contracts, different ones, you know. Therefore, it might be 20 miles, 15 miles, 100 miles. You can't tell 200 miles. And then when you get that through, if they're still building farther, well, you take another contract. Now, that's the way the contracting was done on railroads in those days. Well, let's see, he had to work down, let's see, from the, what's the name of this railroad that runs, Pendleton? Yeah, he built part of that, and Fort Smith and Western and Fort Smith, Arkansas. There was a good hunk of that, and then on the Frisco around Hugo, Oklahoma, and Hugo, and also around Lawton. So that's the contractors here in Oklahoma.
Did you know C.G. Jones? He was quite a railroad promoter. He promoted the Frisco particularly.
Well, Concord was a big figure in the Frisco coming to Oklahoma City. That made Oklahoma City, if you want to know it. In fact, there was a fuss between Guthrie and Oklahoma City, and then it was built to Oklahoma City, and that was the turning point.
Mm-hmm. Was it Concord or Overholser who was it?
Concord. Concord was the backer of the way. Now, you want to know that I was out pushing the things, and Dad was handling the other part of the dang on thing. So these names all, I could see them in letters and reading. In writing and this and that and the other thing. Then of course it made an impression on me. Oh well, my God! That's right. I was too young to go work, but Dad didn't think so. He believed it. He believed it'd work.
He did.
He did, for a fact. He's very retired man, and didn't have much to say, and he wouldn't push himself socially or civically. He just wouldn't do that. He retired on that, and he just didn't see any point in it, and it might have been bashful. I don't know. I'm a little bit that way myself. So, anyway, he was very much so that way, but he was, of course, running into these things and handling whatever came up.
He's got a thing that impressed me about that painting. The Father Gerrer, though, is that painting hanging in the Vatican today. And I've seen it.
Well, that was done.
He's in good company there, you know. Michelangelo. And
yeah. Well, anyway, he stayed up at Monet Cassino.
Who did?
Father Gregory.
Oh, was he? Was he
up.
stationed there?
Well, he was there what time he was close to Rome.
That's one figured in World War II.
Oh, yeah. They asked Father Gregory here about that. He said, bomb it. Blow it off. Yeah, he did.
You know, the Germans were up.
Oh, yeah.
Americans were losing a lot of lives on that Monet Cassino.
That was a home base for the
I talked to some fellas that were on that drive, and boy, they said it was murder. They were losing lots of men up there.
They were.
Huh?
They were losing
Oh, yeah, that's right. No question about it. Well, let's see. The grain milling, let's see.
How about in Urban?
Oh, yeah, in Urban, yeah. He built the first in Urban one from here to from here to Yukon and turned around. Yukon, yeah.
Didn't it go on to El Reno?
It later went on to El Reno after he'd sold it to the Street Railway Company here.
He built that. He built the first in Urban and operated it.
That's right. He operated.
It came down about 39th Street.
Well, it came down to about 39th. Switched on and went into the old terminal building downtown Oklahoma City, right down Classen Boulevard.
Oh, it did.
How about Guthrie and Norman? Did he build those?
No, he didn't build those. Guthrie was next built, and then Norman was built. And but he built the first and operated over there. And then they also had the Street Railway Company over at El Reno that figured into getting over there to El Reno in the deal. This fellow named Schaefer was mixed up in there also.
Which Schaefer?
Henry Schaefer. There was two of those brothers, Henry and Herman. Herman stayed up in Omaha. He started out working for a company at Weatherford, and then went to Omaha from there.
Wonder where your father got the power for his interurban. He have a generation plan, or did he buy it?
He bought it, I think, off of the Street Railway Company. They had
Belle Isle?
Well, either Belle Isle or down here at this. They had a station right down here south of 4th Street on Clashing.
Clashing.
Yeah.
Where the old Genie has it constructed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Old Genie's got a substation to the north of it. Yes. Yeah.
But they had a power plant there then.
Yeah. The railway company had.
Yeah. I might have had one. I remember a small generator in there.
Well, that's what it was for, I think. And that was the only power they had to put on. When they got over to El Reno, they had to build a substation over there to boost the power. The power would lose so much power coming from Oklahoma City to go over there that they had would be enough to operate the cart.
Kick it up.
Yeah, kick it out to boost it up.
Your dad was also, he got into the cattle business, didn't he?
Well, yeah, he and his dad bought this known as the Rio Grande Ranch. It starts 2.5 miles east of OK, Oklahoma. It runs over to Grand River. There's 220 acres in there. And that ranch started out by a fellow named Dr. Daly. And he had made a deal with Ringling Brothers Circus to winter part of their circus there. Well, the deal fell through, but they had built some wonderful structures on the thing. And they did it with all of the timber on the place, and they had their own rock crushers for their stone and things like that. And the house, and they fenced it with a 5-foot woven wire fence with 3 bobs on top of it. If a post had to go in the solid rock, there's where it went. And they put that into sections of 7 different pastures. Then later on, Dr. Daly sold it out to this fellow Gillespie, the oil man over here in Tulsa. He went down there and operated, and he turned it into a shorthorn cattle, registered cattle ranch. And Gillespie sold it to Clint Strong out here, Clinton, Oklahoma. Clint Strong traded my dad and his brother for their interest in the Clinton, Oklahoma Western Railroad. That's one I hadn't mentioned. They built from Clinton out. That was built in 1912. I was on that thing when I was a kid out there. All my time, but all I traveled with them both. And they kept the ranch until 1936, I think it was. They sold it to somebody here down around out of Frederick, Oklahoma, who bought it then. What's happened to it now, I don't know. I think some Kerr-McGee, somebody in Kerr-McGee Oil Company owns most of it there now.
They bought a prize bull down there one time. I remember that. And
Parkdale Rex is his name.
it's a very expensive bull, and it got sick right away and died, didn't it?
$10,000.
$10,000 bull.
Yeah, that's right.
And how long did it live?
Oh, I think he lived probably a year and a half, something like that.
Did you get a chance to breed it? Mike?
Yeah, that's some. We had the rest of the stock. I lived on the place over there. Dad is having trouble over there, and Dad sent me over there to iron it out. And I was over there about a year and a half. And And one day he came over there and fired the guy that's on there and said, "Now you got to run this thing." I had no idea. I wasn't a rancher, but I ran it for him. And I ran there 2 years before I came back to Oklahoma City. And went to school back here again. I went back to went to Hill Business College, and then I took out to the west, Idaho and New Mexico and Oregon, places like that.
When did you move west?
I was intermarrying
Yeah.
on all these things all the time.
Yeah.
So there wasn't any particular time. My home was here,
Yeah.
but I'd be out 9 months, 10 months, sometimes a year on a job before I'd get back to Oklahoma City. But I'd always learn.
Remain your home state. Here.
Yeah, right. Then I got married in 1927. And so Miss Alpha Down, daughter of Lillian Downs, was raised up here, and she came from Virginia and so forth, but she played quite in the early days politics. She and Mrs. Down, Senator Gore, Senator Phelps over at Reno, and Thomas and Lawton.
Elmer
Thomas, and Mrs. Anna B. Corn, and she got interested started at Oklahoma Historical Society. I knew her well.
Hall of Fame.
Yeah, Hall of Fame. And Mrs. Pike at Tahlequah, and Miss Kafke from Forgan, Panhandle. And Mrs. What was that guy? Mrs. Up in Medford, Oklahoma. Big, played in politics here in the early days. You know? Well, anyway, if you want to find out anything about anything going in on politics or what's going to happen, all you had to do is just contact one of those. And the old lady Fight from El Reno, she was from Tahlequah. She was a Cherokee Indian. And her mother carried her on this Trail of Tears when they come out of Georgia. Well, she's pretty frank spoken. Oh, yeah. If you want to run for office in that eastern part of the state, you had to see her first. That's all there was to it. If she said no, you better leave it alone, I'll guarantee you.
She Dr. Fight's wife.
Well, not Pat Fight there. There's Dr. Reese.
F.B. Fight.
There was 2 fights in Tahlequah. And there's Pat and Mike are the sons of the brother of the man that married Mrs. Fight that I knew. And now, of course, there's doctors now, or one a U.S. district attorney over there that's the son of one of these Dr. Fights over there right now. Well, and he'd come out and sit down at the table down there, and she'd say, "Bob, I wouldn't be here if I didn't like you. Because I won't break bread with anybody I don't like."
That was who, Ms.
Ms. Fight. Ms. Fight.
Did you know Kate Fight?
Oh, yeah, that's her daughter.
Kate Fight Smullen?
Yeah, Smullen, yeah. They live up there north of it. I don't know if she still lives.
I kind of bet she's not, because I saw her about 7 or 8 years ago.
Well, she was getting pretty old.
She had a stroke, and she was kind of out of it, not able to talk very well. And I just didn't feel it.
Yeah, I know that family well.
That home was like it's worse than my office in just stuff all over everywhere.
Well, her husband built that home.
I know it.
Yeah, he built it.
But I mean, it is the most complete. I never saw so much memorabilia.
Oh yeah, there's another politician here in town that she died here last year, Marie Bailey down at Ada.
Yes.
Yeah, she was. They all stay at our house.
How about Senator Gore?
Well, yeah, he would come back, and Oklahoma, and the first thing she'd do would always come to our house, and so his wife would too, and they had some children that they lived in Fort Worth, Texas, But in Senator Gore, he was, I'd seen him. He'd been at my office downtown, way downtown, picking up material and stuff like that. And his wife was a constant reader, and when he wasn't, why, my mother-in-law would read to him all the time. Some guy reading, he'd spend hours and hours and hours of people reading books to him.
He was blind.
Yeah, he was
Completely
blind.
blind.
Oh, yeah, he was completely blind. He's buried right here in the Fairlawn Cemetery right
He was
there.
a very good friend of your mother-in-law. Is that?
Yeah, Mrs. Downs.
Yeah, your
That's how I
mother.
became in contact with him, really. And of course, we was all living together. And so they spend time out there. And the only thing I didn't care about the whole doggone thing, he liked chitlins.
Oh, Gore did?
Yeah. And we'd have to go down and get those things from the packing house. Call them out the house. We'd have to move out of the house while she's cooking those chitlins.
One of the most sensational things in the Gore administration was this rape accusation that made the headlines all over the world.
Yeah.
Do you know anything in the background on that story?
No, I
came
don't.
about?
No, I don't remember. I don't remember about that.
Did Mrs. Downs ever discuss it with you?
No. Well, she would discuss some things, you know.
I mean, she say, about it being a giant frame-up and a political gimmick and all that. She surely said that.
Well, I don't remember. I don't remember, Neil. I really don't. I don't recall it to my mind right now, anyway.
Well, I
But
thought she may have.
no. But there'd be a lot of things that come up. And she even predicted Kennedy's death down here.
She did.
She wrote a letter to my
Who did
daughter,
that?
my mother-in-law.
She was very active in
She wrote a letter to my daughter in Mississippi and said if Kennedy makes this trip to Dallas down there, he'll be killed down there.
Is she living now, your mother?
No, she's not living.
But she was then.
Yeah, she was there.
Was she a delegate to a presidential convention?
No, I don't think she was.
No.
No, well, she'd go to all these conventions and things like that. I met Elmer and numerous trips to Washington, you know.
What do you remember about Elmer Thomas?
Well, not too much. I didn't see him too much. But just like this judge over here, Muskogee, I don't know what was his name.
What kind of judge was he? What type of judge? What court?
I'm trying to think that.
Was it a federal court? Federal.
That's no, wait a minute. Oh, well, I don't know, but his wife used to come by and stay at the house all the time. I mean, well, and just having to think of those people over there. Well, they're all dead. Everyone else up there used to bother about it. Oh, by the way, you wanted to talk about Braniff that way?
Yeah. Oh,
That's an old story. That's an old story here in Oklahoma.
When we hit the hour mark, we'll break for lunch, and then we'll come back. Yeah. Well, we got a little bit. When we break, we'll break for lunch.
We're talking about Braniff and
Braniff was organized by Paul Braniff. And he flew his own plane, he did his own mechanical work, and sold his own tickets. Carried 3 passengers in a round trip twice a day from here to Tulsa.
And tell what Paul Braniff was to you.
Well, he's my brother-in-law.
Yeah.
And,
Bob said,
I had 2 sisters married Braniff, Paul Braniff and Phil Braniff. Phil was stayed in the real estate and insurance and lived in Tulsa, and Paul lived here.
You never hear of Phil Braniff in history now. You hear of Tom Braniff and you hear Paul Braniff.
Phil Braniff is the best one in the whole bunch in my book.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, they operated out of this airport that's right on Southwest 29th Street, just the other side of May Avenue. That was my first airplane trip out of that airport over there. And Paul was quite a promoter. He promoted everything, and he was good at it. Well, he got several people interested in forming an airline, so they put their money in and formed it, and they'd lose money. They wasn't going any farther than Kansas City, I don't think, but they wasn't. But they said, well, if we have a mail contract, we can make it go. So Paul goes up to Washington, and lobbies up there for 3 months. He put a bid in and cutting the mail rate right in half. And then the government told him his equipment wasn't good enough to haul the mail. He said, baloney. So I've got just as good as the one that are carrying the mail. And he stayed up there, and he got the contract. Started making money. Then, the government, Tom Braniff, Paul Braniff's brother, was putting up Paul's shares. So when it gets going there, Tom calls Paul in and says, here, we don't like this. You either put your share up within, I don't know what time it was, it's 30, 60, or 90 days, or you're out. And that's exactly what happened. He was out. That's how Tom Braniff became. And, Tom Braniff had a two-way clip at it. He was making money off the airline, and he was selling them all the insurance that they had to have. He was doing pretty good. And that's kind of a thorn in all the stockholders' side.
Yeah. Paul was, the promoter he was, how come he was never able to get the money to put up?
Well, he got it from the people that he could do it with to start with.
Yeah.
He knew where he could get money to start with.
Yeah.
Just like
This is a continuation of our interview with Mr. Bob Maney.
I'd like for you to continue with stories that you might know about Paul Braniff. I don't think that we have anything on him yet.
Well, as far as I know, I've been through that. There, he started the airlines.
Yeah, but we missed part of it on the tape.
Well, when he was, when the company started, I'll go back to the time that he finally got the mail contract, which was cut in half of the price of carrying the mail. Government granted him the contract to carry the mail. Mm-hmm. The line began to make money. At that time, Paul was called into Tom's office and told me he had owed so much money. He gave him so length of time to raise the money, or he'd have to be out of the company.
In other words, Tom put up the money, and
Put up
Paul's
share.
He put up Paul's share, and he was calling that he was calling it in. He wanted the cash.
That's right. That's exactly the way it was. Well, Paul couldn't raise the money, so Tom took it over completely. From that time on, Paul had no interest. But when Tom died, Tom gave each one of the relatives in his family 2,000 shares of Braniff Airways stock. But I don't know whether they have it yet or not. I doubt it.
In other words, Paul, after all his efforts, and he is actually the one that saved that line he actually went to Washington and made a plea before the Senate subcommittee.
He was there for about 3 months.
He appeared before the Senate
I don't
subcommittee.
know whether he appeared. I don't know who he appeared for him up there, but he lobbied up there, the way I understand it. Different senators and so forth.
Yeah, I remember when he appeared before the committee itself. And
All right, that's it. That's the history as far as.
in other words, he saved that airline when it was about to go under.
Well, to start with, yes. Mm-hmm. After that, it became very lucrative. Mm-hmm. Paying proposition. Mm-hmm. Continued on until after Tom Braniff's death, it was sold out. Then Tim Covott owns it.
Actually, when that airline started, there was only one plane.
One plane is all there was. Carried 3 passengers twice a day, each way from between here and Tulsa.
And did Paul some of the time fly the plane?
He flew. He was the only pilot they had.
Well, there was one other that he got later.
Well, probably later. Yeah, I don't know about that one.
I remember he was with the Braniff Airlines for 40 years down in Dallas. Marie was telling me about him that he actually helped save the line too, because he'd work for nothing and fly those planes.
Well, when Paul was hard up, yes, there's several of them did that very thing. Mm-hmm. They believed in aviation. I think one of them was tip shares or something like that.
Tip Shears, Bob Tarbutton.
Well, I don't know who they are. Marie could tell you that, my sister. She has pictures of all the original pilots of Braniff Airlines.
She does.
Yes. She has.
Tip Shears was a daredevil, wasn't he?
Well, I guess so. I had my first ride in the airplane with him.
He jumped off. He bet somebody he'd jump out of a plane there in the Belle Isle Lake at so many feet. He tore his pants off.
That I don't know.
He landed in Belle Isle Lake.
Never heard that one, but I wouldn't doubt it. Last I heard of flying that he did, he used to fly with the instruments locating uranium, and when they were trying to find uranium out in Colorado and Arizona and so forth, fly down those canyons down there and finding his Geiger counter to start working while he'd drop a sack of flour down there and mark the location where they'd go down and get. That's the last time I heard of what flying he was doing.
Now, Paul knew Wiley Post real well. They were friends.
That's right, and he sure did.
Actually, the Braniff shops in Oklahoma City outfitted the Winnie Mae. They made the conversion.
Anything about the Winnie Mae.
They made the conversion for the around-the-world flight, and they
All I did is kind of like Will Rogers. All I know is what I read in the paper on that.
had a $4,000 repair bill in there.
Well, probably so. I don't know.
You know why it's called?
I didn't know.
I didn't. Where do you know where Wiley Post? Wasn't he a machinist?
I have no idea. I don't know anything about Wiley Post life, so I knew that he was a good aviator, and he was known as such, and he did fly around the world and all that. That's all I know about him.
He's a good friend of Paul's. I remember that, and that's how he happened to be doing the repairs to this plane for the round-the-world flight, the original.
Well,
First.
Paul Braniff served in the Armed Forces, Air Corps, World War I and II.
He was major in the World War II in the Air Force, wasn't he?
I don't know what rank he had or something like that.
I know he operated out of England there when they were.
I don't think he made any flights over any foreign countries over there.
Not at that time. No, he wasn't flying then, I don't think. Well, do you remember when Paul Braniff and John Reinars were flying out of this airport north of the Capitol or somewhere in the area and hit a windmill?
That was on North Kelly. And I forget now just how far north it was. But there's a windmill down there, just a kind of a pasture. And Paul and John Reinhardt got in the plane to take a little ride. And they started up, and Paul ran that plane right into the windmill, sinking down the cave.
And Johnny Reinhardt is still crippled
Johnny Reinhardt still limps.
45 years later.
Yeah, that's about right.
I saw him the other day, and he's still limping from that accident. He said he has a very very good reminder of Paul Braniff.
Yeah, he and several others, I imagine.
He lives right down the road here,
Yeah,
about a mile south of here.
yeah. Well,
Did you ask about the dance hall?
No. Oh, also, Paul Braniff, he was the builder of that dance hall at 40th and Eastern there on the west side of Eastern at 40th. It was in what was Spring Lake Park. There was nothing there though, except a grocery store and then this pavilion, which Paul Braniff put up the money and built it.
he probably did. He had some of the best national, as far as America's concerned, known orchestra, dance orchestras played there too.
Yeah,
George Road out in front. Not even graded, and big hunks of sand rock sticking up in the road.
That's a case of how Paul would gamble. He'd put up huge sums of money to bring those orchestras in here, like Ben Burney and
Goodman or whatever, Benny
King and all the big name bands. Benny Goodman and Sammy Kaye and
Royal Canadian.
Crosby, the Royal Canadians, Kansas City Nighthawks. These were all very expensive bands, and Paul could get him down here without his salesmanship. He could talk an into coming down here, and sometimes it's pretty hard to pay them, and he'd have to find a second job, like playing in the Criterion Theater, to support the pay.
That's probably right. He started several things.
Okay, then he built this dance hall. He built it there at 40th and Eastern, right across from Northeast Lake, and it was well supported. And one of the first broadcasts. They called it remote control. They broadcast from there on WKY, I think.
I don't know about that.
That was one of the first where they went in with remote control and made a broadcast.
Did that dance hall become a part of Spring Lake Park?
Yes.
Well,
See, when they
built on the south end of Spring Lake Park.
Yeah, but it was on Staten's property, and because Paul showed this contract to my father with Staten, the owner of the park, and my dad said, "That's sure a cutthroat contract, Paul." He said, "How'd you happen to sign that?" And within 2 years, Roy Staten had title of that dance hall. He kind of froze him out.
He got frozen out a lot of things too, didn't he? Who? Paul Braniff.
Well, that was one of them. I know that to be a fact, and my dad said, he said, "That's the worst cutthroat contract I ever saw." But he lost it. Staten took it over and operated it much the same way. He brought in some good bands.
There's another thing that was started by J.W. Maney. And he started out the Maney four-wheel scraper. It was drawn by teams. And had his manufacturing plant in East St. Louis. And he got a royalty on every one that was building the company. He formed the company and turned it over to them. He got a royalty out of each one, and they moved the company from East St. Louis to some other part in Illinois, and they changed the name of the company. But it was the Maney four-wheel scraper there for years. It started out moving only 2 cubic yards of dirt per trip. And they were sold over the whole United States. The counties and state and contractors bought them.
What about other people that you have known? We've talked about the Braniffs. Do you recall any others? Or Neil, do you recall some others that we should talk about?
Well, I was trying to think of some of them. He knew, like you're talking about Bob.
Yes.
Bob, how about that Lake Overholser? Your father had a contract out there for the excavations around Lake Overholser.
He had the contract for building the bypass, which runs along the east side of Lake Overholser, from the dam going north to 39th Street. And half of that is a cut, and the other half of that bypass is filled. They use the same equipment in the construction of that as was used on the Panama Canal. And
what do you mean the same construction?
well, the same equipment that was used on the construction.
Actually, the same machine.
Well, I don't know whether it's the same machine, but it's identical. The air dump cars for the railroad and the steam engines that were used to excavate the dirt and rock and so forth. And they had run into, which wasn't in the contract, the original contract, was the excavation of rock and quicksand. Their soundings that they had made prior to the letting of the contract showed sound material all the way through, no dirt, no quicksand or anything. And then they encountered that after they'd taken one layer of dirt off the top of the thing. Consequently, that resulted into a lawsuit after the job was finished.
Yeah.
It took so much extra money. They brought a trainload of slab lumber shipped in from Arkansas from the old sawmills to bolster up the steam shovels to cross that quicksand to get across there. plus other things. And that lawsuit lasted 12 years, finally settled in J.W. Maney's favor.
How much was it? How much
Well,
did you get?
We got something like, we sued for about $180,000, and we got net results after paying attorney fees and discounts of the settlement to getting the lawsuit settled. We got about $120,000 out of it. Well, we paying interest on that money for 12 years, and so I don't guess we lost money on it one way or the other. That wouldn't be the first time. Take it or leave it. You can't win them all.
But how about collecting it after you won the suit?
Well, we had to come back. It was handed down from the Supreme Court of Oklahoma in Dillie's favor, but nothing was said about interest on the money at the time that the suit was brought. We had to go back to the district court again, and we won that suit.
Won both of them.
And in district court.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They were going to appeal it back up to the Oklahoma Supreme Court again. At least they let on like they were. So they offered them a discount to settle the claim if they'd pay off. So they did.
Who offered them the discount?
I did.
You did.
They paid off all right. Got the money that same day. That was the end of that lawsuit.
Who was the district attorney? Who was the city attorney?
To start with, it was Frank Martin.
Was that the one that was mayor too?
That's right.
Mayor.
That's right.
He was a very close friend of your dad's at one time.
Right.
Actually, they were both grand knights of the
Not Not Columbus, that's true.
both of them were grand knights.
Well, at different times, yes. But getting here and here and there, that's the way it came out. Oh yeah, I didn't say anything here. Did I ever? No, yeah. Well, I did talk about that. And being
What was that?
county surveyor, Stadium County.
Yeah, we mentioned that.
Yeah, mentioned that. Mentioned the scrapers. Didn't mention anything. I don't know about anything much about these coal mines. He owns coal mines over in eastern Oklahoma for quite a while.
He did. How about? Do you remember any stories about those coal mines?
Not a thing about that. I never missed out on that. But in 1936, he decided he wanted to go up to Denver and Colorado Springs and prospect for gold. He had health trouble being low blood pressure. And getting the higher altitude, he felt better, so that's where he wanted to be in these last years. So he went up there, and he worked out of Colorado Springs, investigating different mines. And we went up to Leadville, up there to Twin Lakes.
How about Cripple Creek?
Well, just a minute, and I'll bring that up. Went up to Leadville, and we were diverting a river up there coming down out of the mountains there, above Twin Lakes, which is just south of Leadville, to clean out a waterfall. Thought maybe the water come down and wash the gold down in the bottom of the field. There's a natural dam down below, so well, we just shut off the water by diverting it and get in there and clean it out. Well, it turned out that the force of the water in the spring of the year was so great that it washed all the gold down. All we got is a bunch of black sand. So that was in that. We spent 4 months up there doing that. I was up there on that job.
Well, I remember he also.
And then while I was in town to get some dynamite in Leadville, I was standing on the street the one afternoon with a fellow, and there happened to be hardly anybody there. Everybody was out working. And I looked across the street, and there was an old lady walking down across the street over there. Had a bird nest hat on, and a pair of tennis shoes, and black taffeta dress that you'd wear back, they didn't back in the 1880s or someplace. I said, who's that old character? He said, you don't know her? I said, no, I don't know her. Who is she? He said, well, that's Baby Doe. That was Tabor's wife.
Baby Doe Taylor.
That's right. that's
He was a silver man.
That's right. He's the one that landed up there. So the story about Tabor, and you can go on that. There's a moving picture of that Clark Gable played Tabor and Baby Doe and his first wife. They finally divorced over this young lady named the nickname Baby Doe. Well, that was before they extended the government on standard of gold instead of silver. And she took her money that she got out of their divorce, and she invested in real estate there in Denver. And Tabor discovered that but he told her to remember, keep hold of the silver. Now this is after it broke. He even talked to her. Says, remember, keep track of the keep the silver. Someday it'll be worth something. Well, after I left there, I was living down there by Cripple Creek, Colorado. Then we went down there and started doing some prospecting. Baby Doe dies. The young lady came down the side of the mountain where she was living up there in a little old shack, and said, see her every morning to look after the old lady. And she looked in after her, but came by this morning, she was in the house there dead. Well, when they looked in the trunks that she had, a bunch of these old round-top trunks, which was full of silver services. The thing that she had when they had this when they was living high as they could live in Denver in the early days. And she had kept every piece of silverware that she had accumulated all the time. And that was Baby Doe. As far as that's my personal experience with Baby Doe.
You actually saw her then.
Oh yeah. I didn't talk to her, but I saw. Yeah. Well, she was quite old then. And, then we went down to Cripple Creek, and we messed around down there for a year or two, and we finally went down to a mine, and we struck a little rescue. He was pittering around there and wasn't done any good, so he said, somebody told us, get up as high as you can get. That's the best place to look for gold. Well, he did. He went up there, and he took me up there and said, well, here's a mine here we can buy. The fellow says, he says, how much you want for this mine? I said, well, I didn't know anything about mining to speak of. I knew how to knock rock out from that change of river, but not go down to the mine. I never had been down one. And he said, well, I'll take $5,000. I said, no. I told him that, no. I said, that's too much money for us. Down there, they're just messing around down there. They don't have any gold. Well, turns out that they didn't. But got in the car and we was heading back to Oklahoma City. We was going to come back here. And I said, Dad, if you really want to stay up here now and you want to mess around, I go back there and I'd offer them $1,500 for that mine. I think they'll take it. So he said, turn around. So I turned the car around, went back up there, and we bought the mine. And we worked up there, about 4 years. We were fortunate enough to, in our prospecting, we run into a little vein, not a big one. And it paid our expenses. We didn't make any money. It paid our expenses. And then he got what he wanted.
Was that one that was being reworked?
Oh, yeah. All those mines are reworked. You can't own we worked on the Pharmacist mine. The only two people own the mountain and around Cripple Creek, and that's United Gold Mine Corporation and Stratton Estate. They own them both. And they charge you about for every ounce of gold you got, you had to give up about 46.5%. But you had to do your own prospecting on your own. They wouldn't stand any part of that. So they get 46.5% of whatever you find. So it's kind of like your contract you were talking about a while ago. It's all one side. And they'd charge you on the little railroad they had. They'd charge you graduate scale on freight rate according to the value of the ore. It wasn't pounds. A pound of gold, they'd charge you more for hauling you a pound of gold than they would for hiring a pound of ore. It's all in the same rock. It's not refined out, though. And you take their settlements for it and so on, and it wasn't too good a deal. Anyway, we stayed up there until we ran out of ore, and there came a time when the government put restrictions on steel and powder use in gold mines. We had about out of ore anyway, so that was a good time for us to pull out, so we did. And we pulled out and came back down here, and Dad died in July the 13th, 1945. I finished that story about that blood check, did I?
Blood check.
Where he believed in, it wasn't on the 13th, you know?
Oh, yes it is. Is that what we talked about there, though?
Yeah, well, I think it was cut off about the time we were talking about leaving the check. Well, I was curious about the check that we talked about prior.
Tell about. Start it over.
Well, okay, start over. Dad would not start a job on a 13th or a Friday. He just believed in that. He'd rush out one day ahead of time or one day late, wait a day late. Start it. Well, when he died on July the 13th, which was a Friday. And I had left this check for a blood transfusion at the office of St. Anthony's Hospital. And I was curious about who was a blood donor. I looked in the back of it, and there was Ansel Ark. His son was an intern out here at University Hospital at that time. And he cashed it at a Reedy's drugstore, and the Reedy's drugstore, he had to write his address down where he was a resident. And there was 1313 North Phillips. That's right. Now, I've got that. I saved that check. That's the truth.
That check was made out to who?
Ansel Ark.
Was that the insurance man?
Well, it's his son.
His son's a doctor.
He's trying to be a doctor, yes. He's a doctor now. Yes.
That is a good story. I think you forgot to mention your dad was he was a grandson. I mean, his father was from Ireland, and your father, when he was over here, he worked in Oklahoma City. He worked for the Friends of the Irish Freedom. I don't know what it was called.
It was called the Irish Free State League of Oklahoma unit. He was president of that during its functioning days. And the sole purpose was to raise money for the freedom of the whole of Ireland. This Mary McSweeney made a trip over here one time, of which they entertained her in Oklahoma City.
Who was Mary McSweeney?
Mary McSweeney was from Ireland herself. Now, what's her position over there, I don't know.
I mean, her brother. The brother is one that starved himself to death. Said, "Give me liberty or give me death."
Yeah, well, that might be right over there. I don't remember that part of it.
That's right.
And anyway, there was C.J. Tuohy and Dr. Braniff. He wasn't an MD or any type of doctor, but he was known as such. A doctor, people call him Doc. And they were the ramrods of the Irish Street, and they were they were pro-Irish for freedom, and there's quite a few people in Oklahoma that were pro-English. That fought all the causes that they try to make. It was quite a battle. There's plenty of meetings held in his house up there on Chartel over this one issue, laying their strategies and this and that, anything working for the freedom of Ireland.
Their idea was to get American sympathy for Irish freedom from England, and the press, especially here in Oklahoma City, was very much opposed. They called it they referred to it as a religious issue, and which wasn't the case.
Well, regardless which way it is, one way or the other, those are the pros and cons of the issue. That's still going on part of it over there on the north of Ireland.
Well, probably if they would have followed the movement then was to get complete freedom from England. And as a result, they didn't do that. They split it, and now the argument's still going on.
That's right. That's exactly the way it is.
You were telling me, Bob, about some kind of a quilt that was in the historical building now.
Yeah, Mrs. Phelan lives in Oklahoma City, and she crocheted a quilt hanging over here in the Oklahoma Historical Society. And it had she had put a quilted picture of the Enid Milling Company on the quilt. That was a flour mill that J.W. Maney and Company owned at that time.
It's still in the Historical Society?
As far as I know, it is. Still there.
We might talk a little about the Maney Building and some of the things around it when you first moved in. What were your neighboring buildings?
Well, pretty much it was the same as they were at the time. We'll say, when did urban renewal come in? 1940?
Urban renewal in
48, 49?
We are close to 50.
What?
Late 50s.
Well, anyway, it's pretty much the same.
The companies were different.
Companies were different. I have an invoice in my office up in the next block of the old B&M that was sent out. And let's see, we've done business with the First National Bank when they would start out where the Hales Building is, and then went across the street called the American National, and then up to the First National. They went diagonally across from the Hales, and that was a corner location there. And then the next day, for a long time, there was a jewelry store down there after they moved down. Quite a long
You were in the same, you were a block, you were east of the Hales Building, weren't you?
We were in the 100 block on the south side.
You don't remember what bank that was there at Broadway in Maine, across the street from the building, a little east.
Broadway in Maine?
The Western National Bank.
Well, there was a bank on our same side years back, named Guaranty Bank or something like that. And there's also a bank across the street from us, next to where Stern's clothing store was.
Wasn't that the Western National Bank?
Could have been. It went broke over there.
Went broke and inflation came in there.
Yeah.
You don't remember a day and night bank, do you?
Oh, yeah, that one broke, too.
Where was it?
I think it was in the location we just talked about.
Oh, on the corner.
No, in about the middle of the block. Just a little more to the middle, going west. Across the street from where the Empire Building was. It'd be about, see, 124, 26, it'd be about 128, 29, 31.
You don't remember a famous restaurant downtown there called the, where was Cunder's?
That's right.
Cafeteria.
Right in there where that picture show is, right?
Criterion?
No, right. Going half a block, practically a half a block south on Robinson off of Main Street.
Across from the Harbor Theater.
Do you remember when Criterion was built?
Well, it wasn't ahead of us. No, it wasn't ahead of us. The only picture show in the early days was there was a Empress there across the street.
I even remember the manager there, O'Shea.
Well, he was in there in later years, of course. O'Shea, I remember him.
Well, in those days, there was the Liberty Theater and the Lyric Theater.
Not down Main Street.
No. I was talking about down Liberty and Overhaul and Dreamland Theater and.
The farthest theater on Main Street going west was right next to where the Kerr department store was. That's the Capitol Theater.
Mm-hmm. That was the old Dreamland.
Midwest Theater was on Harvey, south of Main Street.
Do you remember anything about Buttrick's, L.E. Buttrick that run the ballrooms?
I remember he had a dance hall down there on California and Walker. Mm-hmm. And he also had a dance hall up in between 9th and 10th.
Cinderella Roof.
Well, whatever it was, on the west side of that block.
Mm-hmm. And he had one there at 4th and Santa Fe, where the Mistletoe Express is. He called it the Winter Garden.
Well, could have. I don't remember. I remember the name Winter Garden, but I don't remember the building.
Yeah, actually, he was in on that Spring Lake deal. He was in on that ballroom with Paul Braniff, wasn't he?
I don't know, but it wasn't.
The two of them were together. I forgot to.
Oh, it could be. Mm-hmm. But he was up there at Spring Lake. Buttrick had something to do with the dance hall up there at Spring Lake.
Sure. Well, that was the same one, Braniff. They were in together. I forgot that. He also was at Belle Isle Pavilion.
Yeah, the Belle Isle Pavilion there out there. The old Delmar Garden. I don't remember anything about that. I only got just as a kid. I used to go down there. And then the old baseball park was out.
You remember Delmar Gardens, though?
Yeah, I remember that Delmar Garden there.
You were there?
Yeah.
There's the theater there?
They had a little bit of everything there. Kind of like they try to copy Coney Island out of New York. What they try to do.
Where they got their idea.
Mm-hmm. That's what I understood. And Snoplo started that.
John Snoplo, was it?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's right. That's where he made his money in here in Oklahoma City.
He would be the same one that owned the Overholser Theater.
Well, it could be, yeah. Yeah, and also the Midwest City. The Midwest Theater in downtown Oklahoma City.
I think Snoplo took over the Overholser and tore it down, built the Orpheum Theater.
Well, I don't know about that.
Actually, the old Overholser was torn down. Maybe the outer walls were used, but he reconstructed it almost 100% into the Orpheum Theater. Brought big-time acts from all over. 5 acts of vaudeville, and they
had a theater there right there across from where the First National Bank is now, about 119 North. 19 North Robinson. That'd be that. No, it'd be 119 North Robinson. Yeah. Yeah. Then where there used to be the Perrine Building.
That was it. The Lyric was in there.
Yeah, the Lyric Theater was there. That's right. Yeah. Well, there used to be a lot of things around down there. The Richcon Hardware Store was on Park Avenue, on the north side of the street, halfway between Robinson and Harvey. And then before they went down there on the Santa Fe tracks down there on West Main Street. And then they went over to Grandin Santa Fe tracks.
There was a kind of a cabaret across the street from where the Empire Building, the Maney Building, or the Empire Building across the street. The north and a little west was was it the El Patio? Or?
I don't know. Empress Theater was on the west side there in that 100 block.
Oh.
I mean, on the north side. Empress. In the early days, right next door to that, there was a saloon, and there was Sims Pool Hall over there. Also, they had a large lunch counter and had a pool in the back part of it, and stuff like that there. And that was,
You don't remember the Brock's department store, do you?
no, I don't remember that too well.
That was the predecessor of the John A. Brown.
That's what Johnny Brown. Well, it could be. Was he a partner of John Brown to start with?
I don't know.
Could be. I think they bought him out or something.
Kerr goes back quite a ways, too.
Well, that's Kerr Halliburton. That Kerr department store downtown was Kerr Halliburton.
Kerr's was there at Harvey, on the south side of Harvey in the southeast corner originally. Then they moved, of course.
They were in the middle of the block up there, the 300 block on Main Street. About the middle of the block. And their back door opened up there where the old streetcar come over.
Well, that's later years.
Yeah, well, that's that big department store that was there.
Before that, they were there on that corner where Cresses or something was in there.
Could be. I don't remember all those stores and stuff. I know that there were jewelry stores there. Anything else you could...
Bob, you didn't tell us much about your family. You have a...
I'll tell you, I was married June the 1st, 1957. We'll have a 52nd wedding anniversary coming up on June the 1st this year. We had 3 children, 2 daughters and a son. The oldest daughter was born in Reno, Okla. She's now married to C.O. Dean Jr. of Leland, Mississippi. He primarily a family affair down there, farming and banking. And they operate close to, that family operates close to 8,000 acres of Delta farmland down there. Most of the land's around a little town in Mississippi named Pendleton. Yes, they have other farms from other places, but that's the bulk of the land down there, and that's where they keep their shops and their grain elevators and their cotton gins and everything else.
Now, which daughter married into that family?
The oldest one, Margaret.
Where did she go to school?
She went to school in Randolph, Macon. She spent 4 years and graduated from there.
The other daughter went to where?
The other daughter went to University of Oklahoma and graduated from there. She graduated, both daughters graduated out with educational degrees. The first one had a straight educational degree, and the second one got a Bachelor of Science degree in education.
Now, this second daughter lives in South Africa?
Yeah, she taught school. The other one did too in Oklahoma City for about 6 months and then got married. The other girl taught school here in Oklahoma City school system and taught school at Midwest City. And then she taught school in New Orleans, Louisiana. Yeah, she met her husband there and they were married, and their home now is in Pretoria, South Africa. He's with the South African government. He's a native South African. And he's in the legation department of the government, operating out of Pretoria. The last assignment they just finished was Stockholm, Sweden. They had spent 6 years there, and they're back in Pretoria now for at least 2 years to be assigned again to some other place. They don't know which place. So time will tell. That's all I can tell you about it.
Their son's with Sears Roebuck.
The son, Michael, works for Sears and Roebuck Company in the automotive department. I'll tell you about grandkids. The one in Mississippi has 5 grandchildren. The son here has 5 children, makes me 5 grandkids. The son has 3 children, makes me 8. My daughter in Toya has 2 children. This makes me have 10 grandkids. That's all the damage I can do.
This has been an interview with Mr. Bob Maney, made in Oklahoma City at the Living Legends office at Oklahoma Christian College on May the 16th, 1979.
Thank you, Bob.
You're welcome.